is a residential corrections facility. And I have with us today two of our fabulous teachers, if they'd like to speak a little bit towards Marquise before we watch a little clip from his graduation video. So Ms. Tay or Melissa, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, I could. Tay texted me and said she's having some microphone issues. So she texted me something she'd like to pass on. So this is from Tay. She said, she's so glad our program's been so successful in the past few years. Oh my gosh, sorry. She wants to walk in my keyboard. And it's so amazing to actually see students get to the finish line versus feel like you made an impact and you don't get to see what happens next. Like sometimes we just have students that for just a little bit and we don't get to see them graduate. We've made such beautiful partnerships. The majority of our students come from Minneapolis, and I feel like we have such a strong partnership with them. And specifically, we've been able to master creating learning that incorporates all of their needs, which has been amazing with the guidance of our admin. And I just want to piggyback off of that. This young man came in and he was in our class. He was really close to graduating, which was pretty amazing. And we worked with Minneapolis. They kind of laid out what was necessary, and we worked with them closely, updated them often with credits. He also had a job outside of the building. But this young man came to class every day, tired as heck sometimes, but showed up every day and did whatever we asked because he was motivated. He wanted to graduate for one thing, but he also just a bright light. I mean, just a good kid. And it was so nice to see him get to that finish line, like Tay said. And I couldn't ask to work with better people. The support we have from our school district and from the building that we work in is phenomenal. Like connecting and just trying to get all of us to see how we all work together. Like what we do does make an impact on people, and it's pretty cool. And I'm so proud of this kid. Like he's had roadblocks and things come up and up and up, and he did it. Like he worked hard, and yeah, I'm so proud.
Thank you, Melissa, for sharing a few words. I also want to point out, too, that, yes, he's a student of Minneapolis, but we're providing the services on behalf of Wayzata, and it's absolutely a privilege to be working in that facility. The kids are the young men, because it's 17 to 22 years old, really want to get their diploma, and we work really hard with them and individualize that instruction while they're with us. I don't know, Juanine, would you mind queuing up the graduation video, and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have.
Okay, today we are here to celebrate Marquise's accomplishments. When I say you're one of the kindest and most humble students I've had the pleasure of having in my classroom, I'm not lying. You show this time and time again with your thoughtful reflections on situations and kind words you have for other people, and advice, like trying to, stop this, we did that too, so that was really good. You also have a great vision for your future. The things you casually said in class about how you want your life to look in a few years show me that you not only have the ability to plan and set goals, but you think enough of yourself to see that you can achieve what you put your mind to. Your teachers and people in the room who you interact with on a daily basis can see that potential, but it means so much more that you can see that in yourself, and that's a big deal. I know you'll go on to do great things that will set you up for future success and victories. When you graduate from college, tell us, because we'll come and celebrate that too. Okay, honestly. There's a quote from the guy that wrote the Winnie the Pooh books, which you guys have probably all heard, but it's a good one, and I think this applies to you because you are so humble. Promise me, I might start to cry actually, you'll remember that you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. So, always remember that.
Thank you all for coming today. I like to keep things short and sweet, so that's what I'll do. The big word we hear in school is resilience, which according to Google Dictionary is the capacity to withstand and recover quickly from difficulties all are dealt a hand in which we have to be resilient in some capacity. And I think of you, this is the word that comes to mind. You have been through so much in your short time being on earth, and some people in this room might not be able to fathom what you've been through. Your strength and perseverance and never giving up on his people. This is a big accomplishment. You should feel amazing, powerful, and successful. Remember how far you have come. Remember how far you will go. And we're all so very proud of you. We cannot wait to see what the future has in store for you. Also, special shout out to Marquise's mom. He's talked about you from day one in the classroom all the way to his last week, and you've really helped him through a lot. Good job.
Our graduations are really cool in care and treatment because they're so small and personalized, and we had walking tacos and just celebrated and had that time with his family too. So, yeah. Any questions or comments?
Education for me. Can you say a little more about School 519 and where it is and how it's structured and who it serves?
Yeah, School 519 is a residential corrections facility. And we serve 17 to 22-year-olds. We typically serve, very small amount of students per year, usually around 6 students. They could be there for a very range of time, ranging from typically 3 to 6 months, dependent on what the court has ordered for them. The building has a capacity of around 300. And then those would be the adult men that we don't provide the educational services
And where
for.
is it located?
It's actually located right off of Parker's Lake, right in Wayzata, which is why we're providing that service on Wayzata's behalf.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just add, pre-pandemic, we had to get on the bus where a number of us on the board were able to visit the school. And it was a really wonderful experience. And I think Melissa was perhaps the teacher
Yep.
there that day.
Yep.
Okay, I thought so.
Good memory.
And so, I know that there are real limitations to
Yes.
access, but it was a remarkable experience, and it makes this, I think, all the more powerful to see Marquise and the incredible work that the two of you have done with him and supporting him and his family through his education. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any other comments or questions?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Melissa and Ms. Tay, for being here tonight as well.
Thanks so much.
Next, we move to our Above and Beyond recipient from the District Service Center. I'm pleased to introduce Assistant Superintendent Elizabeth Lodge Rogers, who will introduce our recipient this month.
Thank you so much, Board Chair and members of the board and Superintendent Dowd. I'm going to try to get through this. We are just delighted that Michelle Wolf, who supports myself and supports our Director of Special Education and all our special ed programs, as well as just a number of other duties, has been recognized in receiving the Above and Beyond. Read from her nomination. This award she was nominated in recognition of her incredible dedication and support across District 287. Her tireless efforts have directly impacted many of us at the District Service Center and in each of our sites and programs. Over the years, Michelle has consistently gone above and beyond her duties to support the well-being of teams. Michelle's uncanny ability to efficiently manage administrative tasks has paved the way for our district and site leadership teams to focus more on their core responsibilities and direct support to our students. Her strategic approach in handling administrative tasks, whether it be optimizing scheduling processes, improving communication channels, or implementing time-saving strategies, has directly contributed to more focused and empowered leadership teams across 287. By streamlining responsibilities, she has allowed our leaders the opportunity to engage more deeply in the educational experience of our students. In times of transition, of which we had many, Michelle consistently steps up to support. Her ability to seamlessly assume additional responsibilities and provide continuity during times of change has not gone unnoticed. When team members have departed in our sites or at the district center, her dedication and adaptability have played a crucial role in maintaining the smooth flow of operations and ensuring that projects remain on track. Last year at North Education Center, we went a good 8 weeks without the clerical administrative senior support person there. And Michelle literally worked from North Education Center and supported that leadership team and that school while continuing to support myself and my entire special education team. She does she'll do the work, and then she proactively will identify the areas that require attention. And then she takes initiative to ensure seamless transition for those teams while refining procedures and protocols and processes that will improve efficiency for everyone. She engages her work in a collaborative and positive approach. Her ability to uplift those around her, offer support, and maintain a positive outlook is a testament to her exceptional professionalism. Her consistent support has been a source of stability and reassurance for everyone. She demonstrates exceptional interpersonal skills, empathy, and genuine passion for creating a workplace where everyone can thrive. She is an asset to our organization, and we are so grateful, Michelle, for the work you do, and you are so deserving. I ask you to come up.
Thank you very much.
Introduce your family, please.
This is my daughter Aubrey. Hi. And my son Corey. Congratulations.
Aubrey and Corey, thank you for being here so that you can absorb all of this appreciation along with your mom. I appreciate that you want no part of being here. Well, we won't prolong the discomfort for you. Other than just to say thank you. I mean, I personally have experienced so many of the things that Elizabeth mentioned. I remember on what was, I think, in many ways the hardest day I've ever had as a board member, getting information from you like immediately, calmly, and clearly. And that was just, it was a gift. And so thank you, because I know there are so many people who have felt that so many more times than I have. So thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. We will move now to the superintendent's report. So I'm going to turn things over to Superintendent Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like John Voss, the Director of Teaching and Learning, to come up with Kiara Zachary, our Director of Equity and Inclusion. And this is something new for District 287. You might have experienced this in your district, but for the first time, we are receiving American Indian aid. And we're going to talk about what that looks like for District 287.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Rocky and Superintendent Dowd and board members. As Superintendent Dowd mentioned, we're happy to share our planning this year for our new opportunity with our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee and Education Program. Sadly, our members who we had invited to attend tonight could not make it for a variety of reasons. But we will be sharing some comments from them towards the end. Jennifer Powell has graciously agreed to be our parent chair, and Dania Brown is an ESP at North Education Center. She's a staff member with us. And Melania Jones is a student who is very excited about being a part of this whole process. And then Kiara and I and Brenna McDonald, our Senior Manager of Family Outreach, have been providing district support to get the committee started and put the plan together to submit to MDE and start carrying it out. The background in this is that the state provides per pupil funding based on the American Indian student account that we have in the district. And this is the first year that we've had over 20 students. And so this is the first time we've done this. We are required to have the parent advisory committee, and again, are happy that we were able to have the parent, student, and staff members represented. A little further on, we'll explain how we plan to spend the funds that we will be presumably getting once the plan is fully gets through its process. The advisory committee plays a pretty key role in this. They are deeply involved in the planning and ensure that the students receive culturally relevant and equitable educational opportunities, and that then they collaborate with us and with you on an annual compliance report known as the vote of concurrence or non-concurrence, where they come and will report on whether or not we're living up to what we put in the plan and how we're making progress on those goals.
So I'll share with you all a little bit about how we developed our plan and how we got to the point of presenting this to you today. So in September, we started outreach. We identified, we had a report of all of our students and families that identified as American Indian or Indigenous. And we started reaching out. We did phone calls, emails. Both of our staff, I think, really just reached out and tried to make connections even within our buildings. And I even reached out to member districts to say, hey, do you have students that participated in your programming before, just so we could make that connection and bridge, and they would know what it is that we were talking about creating. So we identified folks that were willing and eager participants and signed up through that outreach process to form the committee with us. And we got to know each other during in October and November and started to talk about what it would mean for the district to have this funding and programming. November 30th, was our deadline for application. So during October and November, we developed goals. We talked about what they wanted to see out of this programming. And then that's the application that we ultimately submitted to the Minnesota Department of Education. We are here with you all today to share that with you and then have this be approved by the board, of course. And we'll do our programming upon approval from MD and you all, of course. And then we'll be back with you actually in February to say for that vote of concurrence. And then we will continue on with our activities in the latter portion of the school year. So it seems like a really quick turnaround, and you'll be getting some information about progress and things like that. But it's been sort of a whirlwind to get everyone together, to get all the pieces together. But I think that we have a plan that is reflective of the needs and wants of our community. The plan requires us to have these things, and you'll see in the packet in our application that we've grouped them in 3 sort of ways. So we'll have cultural supports, we'll have curriculum, and we'll have academic opportunities. And we'll kind of go through and talk to you about how we've taken all of their ideas and supported them and outlined them in each of those areas.
So these are the key goals around academic opportunities, and some of the things that we've been talking about is to provide enhanced academic intervention and supports in response to some of the challenges that students have experienced. During the school day, this will include regular academic and social emotional check-ins with students during the day and during our Native American affinity groups that we'll be talking about a little later. Support staff will check student grades, communicate with them on with their teachers monthly, advocate for extra student support where it's needed, and then additional opportunities can be provided through AVID activities, goal setting, homework help, tutoring, and career planning. And then we'll also provide access to academic enrichment opportunities for learning beyond the school day and outside of the school year. That participation in extracurricular programs will be enhanced through additional staff support, transportation, fee coverage, and a number of other ways to make sure that any barriers to those opportunities are removed. That'll include things that are organized by community organizations like the Minneapolis American Indian Center and by educational opportunities that we provide like West Suburban Summer School.
So next is cultural supports, and students will, John touched on the development of cultural affinity spaces, but this is an opportunity for us to provide a positive identity development in intentional ways to our Indigenous students. So that's where we'll have the opportunity for them to understand more deeply their heritage and culture, and then also provide intercultural awareness. So things that may be true about cultural practices that may be true for Indigenous may also have our Indigenous families and students may also be replicated or visual in other cultures, right? So an example that we talked about in our conversations is drumming. We know that drumming is a cultural activity across multiple cultures, and so this is an opportunity for students to understand and see sort of some throughways. You'll see that one of our parents talked about that, is that being someone who identifies as multicultural, right? To see that there is connections between all of their cultural identities is important. They'll participate in events that provide, again, that positive reinforcement and opportunity to learn some more. And this also includes community partnerships and opportunities to connect with students from our member districts. We've talked to Brooklyn Center, Osseo, and Richfield Public Schools to say, how can we join some of their activities so that our students are able to have a larger affinity space, since some of our student populations can be small at our site.
And then in the area of curriculum resources, we'll also be looking for a variety of ways to highlight these experiences of Indigenous people and build intercultural awareness, emphasizing the rich history and culture, and also showing modern achievements of Indigenous people through relevant resources and materials, a number of the things that we'll be able to purchase with the grant funds, and then spending some time with our teachers and coaches and curriculum specialists on adapting and integrating those resources into our curriculum. And then finally, providing ongoing communication about district-wide events, resources, and holidays and other key points throughout the year.
So our next steps are really just to start implementing the plan. So for instance, Dania, our ESP at North, is really excited about connecting and networking with students to build the cultural affinity space, and plans to do that in January. We'll research and identify opportunities like our Bright Futures Conference. We'll have an opportunity to have Indigenous speakers there, or other ways that we can get our students engaged in either our culture supports or academic supports. And then again, we'll report back to you on February 22nd at that board meeting to determine whether or not we're making adequate progress. Unfortunately, we shared that the plan was that we would have our crew with us today, our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. And because they couldn't make it on such short notice, they graciously provided us with some comments about their why and their sentiments about the beginning of the startup of this program. So Juanine, if you could click that, we'll share this with you. These are their words and their experience, and so we didn't want to read them for you all, but you all can let them wash over you and imagine that they are here with us.
And if you have any questions about any of the program plan, we'll be happy to answer it best we can.
Thank you.
Right, that's what we have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And please do thank our parent and our staff member for sharing their words with us tonight too.
Of
Other
course.
comments or questions? Good.
Yeah, I'm really excited that this is happening in District 287. I know in Hopkins, it's been an amazing experience both for our school board, our community, but especially our students. I am wondering, I didn't get a clear idea of the staff person who said that she was excited about starting the cultural space. Is she going to be implementing that herself, and is that a funded position, funded work, or is this something we're relying on volunteers to do?
She'll be working with others in implementing it, and we'll eventually have contacts at each site to work with the students there. As we get approval for the funding pieces, we can determine which parts of it can apply to some of the time that staff are putting in. It's not a specifically funded FTE position, but any of the extra time that goes into the planning and anything that happens outside of the school day, that's where some of the funds will be applied.
Okay, thank you.
Lucy.
Just want to say thank you for everything that goes in your plan. And I'm really glad to hear that you're working with Brooklyn Center, American Indian Advisory Committee. They presented their plan and it just sounds really great. And so I'm anxious to see how you come together and collaborate, coordinate.
Thanks. Yeah, they were really helpful with ideas for
Yes.
how to make it happen.
Great, great.
Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you. We found out August that we qualified, and so this is the first, and so it was a quick and lift. And so we look forward to our continued work and growth of the program, but just want to say thank you to both of you for your concentrated effort in advocating and getting our program started with conversation. So thank you.
That actually connects to my question. Oh, and maybe more.
No, go ahead.
My comment first was how excited I am that there is student participation in this. We do not have a student on our committee, and now I'm going to bring that idea back to Richfield, so thank you. My question is, because this is the first time we met that threshold, are we at risk of not meeting the threshold in future years and having what could feel like a really inconsistent experience if we're constantly hovering around that 20 student mark?
It is a risk,
Okay.
but I think we're committed to continuing with this now that we have some momentum and some involvement in the planning.
Love that answer. Thank you.
Wouldn't have it any other way. But yeah, the student excitement was particularly encouraging, especially since we were kind of moving this forward quickly. That when we found the parent and the student were as excited to do it as they were, that kind of made it all worth the effort.
That's great. Michael.
And my question was really around our non-native students. How will they be incorporated or experience or exposed to all the things that we're going to be doing through this mechanism?
I want to start by saying that there is our state standards support this work for all of our students. So if there's American Indian education components to our state standards and in all of our core subjects, so they should be able to, right? And then also we talked about the purchase of curricular resources. Those shouldn't be held in isolation. And so we should be facilitating the integration of the curricular and culturally responsive materials to our staff. So it's not just this one book for this one student, right? But that we purchase curriculum so that all of our students can learn. The intentionality of providing windows and mirrors, right? We talked about that. Yes, windows, mirrors,
Hence my
sliding
question.
doors. Yes.
So,
Um,
just like Sherry
mhm.
just said, I like that answer too. In terms of great opportunity, not only to address maybe how this is starting, but to the broader parts that we've talked about before. This is,
Mhm.
it's, hand in glove to that example. Excellent.
I just was curious, if if you're in talks with using our new, American Indian Resource Center at Northview Middle School. I'm just saying.
Not specifically. but
Not
we-
specific-
Fairly
we will
new,
be.
so I don't know if you've talked to Ethan at all, but, he's amazing.
Not directly, but
Not
we will
directly,
be.
yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, he's our American Indian, like lead
Okay.
on all that,
Okay.
and he also has some summer, language and cultural camp
Nice.
things that might be a good,
Wonderful.
Yeah, that'd be
like,
great.
fit.
Great.
We also now have Dakota as a
Mm,
language.
language, yeah.
We're
Language
like
offerings.
cruising in Osseo right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
We're next.
We were behind for a long time.
Thank you. How can, I, as a board member, I'm from Robbinsdale District, and I know that we have an American Indian education group going in Robbinsdale. How can I support, as a board member, improving relationships that way or securing more work? How can I help you do your job better in this area? It's kind of critical for us at this point in our school district, so.
We've been in contact with teaching and learning directors from all of the districts on this, and so I think we've got the contacts for the most part too, for the American Indian committees. So I think we've got some networks that are beginning to grow and develop. And if we need some additional connections, we'll be happy to make use of and connect with you on that.
Sounds good.
That's what
Thank
comes
you.
to mind to me.
I also think that it's just the ability to say we have this going on, right? I know that some of the events that Robbinsdale area schools is throwing, they're open to the community, and so even if we're not aware of it, just to say, for example, our student Melania is at North Education Center. So even if we're just aware of that, so yeah, I think that would be that would be the most supportive way.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you. Again, just want to echo Superintendent Dowd. I think this is really exciting for us, the district and broader community. Oh, it's your report. I don't know what I'm doing. Go ahead.
You're doing
Take
great.
it.
Should I just stay up here?
Yeah, you can just stay up here. So here it is. We are, Madam
I was
Chair,
just so
members of the
excited.
board, I'm here to present to you the 2024-2029 strategic plan. And as I've said from all along, this administrative team has been supportive, but I'm going to ask Dr. Tanya Allen, Ben McGrath, and Dr. Elizabeth Lodge Rogers join Kiara at the podium, because I can't present it by myself, because it was done with leadership by this team in the back, and Camille's been very active in it too, and staff, parents, and students. And so this is with excitement that we get to share 15 months of input in what has been developed. So as we look at it, when we talked about the mission, every single participant said, don't change your mission. From our students, from our families and caregivers, to our staff, to member districts. So our mission is going to stay the same. And so we don't have to change this on the on the wall. The next thing we looked at, if we could move forward to the, oh, thank you. Thank you. And one more, we looked at the values and beliefs. What I am proud of and what I am proud of with our team is we held true to that student voice, staff voice, families, caregivers voice, is elevated higher than administration voice. And so when we started with what would it look like when you're in District 197, what are the values, or what do you believe? How does it feel? What do you want to feel that you're not feeling, or how do you currently feel in this space? We started with the families and the students, and they provided words, about 8 to 10 words around what the values would be. I want to be seen for who I am, my authentic self. I want to be able to feel safe in the space. I want to trust that I'm safe in the space. And so it started with their voice, and then staff came around and whittled it down, and then administration whittled it down to 4, and then there was a vote. So when we look at our values and beliefs, it also aligns to the goals and that we have put forward to say, in order to do this, there's always an action step to your goals. And then there's the adaptive side, right? Even because you do an action step doesn't mean it's coming rooted in authenticity. It's coming rooted in inclusion of all. And so we said, what would we also need to do on the adaptive side to lift these goals and action steps? And so you will see the values that are recommended are tied to belief statements. And so for inclusion, we believe inclusion exists when everyone has equitable access and the opportunity to be acknowledged and validated. And so, do you see me? Am I heard? Integrity. We believe organizational integrity occurs when we hold ourselves and each other accountable. That I will trust that collectively we can be together and do what we need to do to make this district go forward. Trust, that we believe trust is developed through honest, reliability, and when our actions align with district values. There was a lot of conversation about trust, honesty, but it's about your actions align with what you say you're going to do. And authenticity, we believe organizational authenticity happens when each person shows up as their true self, embraces the uniqueness of others, and creates a safe environment. So moving forward to lift this strategic plan and what we believe is the current of District 287, these are our values and belief statements. All right, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Lodge Rogers.
With the work, and I think we've foreshadowed quite a bit of this with you over the last few months. We spent a lot of time talking and meeting with folks, and these 3 themes came out very clearly: achieving academic success, cultivating equity and inclusion, and promoting social emotional learning. And our wonderful communications department put together what we have here as a nice graphic and visual of those, the intersectionality of that work. For each of the themes, we identified 3 goal areas. One's around students. Students meet in the area of achieving academic success. Students meet their individualized academic goals. Staff demonstrate the knowledge and skills to deliver culturally responsive education. And families and caregivers are empowered through collaborative partnerships. And we know that through partnerships and support, our students can reach these outcomes. And we as staff have to really intentionally invite in our families and caregivers to be a part of that process. So this isn't that families and caregivers have some responsibility around this 5-year work of ours. It means the call to action is we as a community have to bring our families and caregivers in to be a part of this process. In the area of cultivating equity and inclusion, the second area, students have equitable access to educational opportunities and resources within District 287. Staff create a district culture that celebrates diversity and advances inclusion. Families, caregivers feel welcomed, heard, and valued in our district. And you can see our values and belief statements are really a nice intersection with each of these goal areas as we go through them. And certainly promoting social emotional learning is critical for the students we serve, so students will thrive emotionally and socially. Staff cultivate a positive, safe, and healing learning environment for one another and for students. We know we have to be present and available to our students in order to meet their needs. And we will also want to empower our families and caregivers through partnership and resources in supporting their children, their kids, their students to reach their SEL goals. Those are 3 themes in the goal areas. And I will hand it off to Ben, who's going to talk about achieving academic success.
Good evening. I'll start us off by talking about 6-month goals that we have for achieving academic success. These are goals that we will complete by June 30th of this next school year. First of all, when it comes to our students, it's identifying an appropriate assessment, a literacy and math assessment for each of our students. It's one thing to take the FAST or the MAP test and apply that to students across the district. But in District 287, we want to make sure that each of our students have an appropriate assessment, and it might not be the FAST or the MAP assessment. So our goal for this coming forward of the school year is to ensure that we've identified what an appropriate assessment is for each of our students, and that we have a plan for how we're going to deliver the professional development needed for our staff to be able to administer those assessments when we come back next school year. For our staff goals, we have a collaborative planning time guide. Now, this is a document that's actually existed a number of years ago in our district. Our goal for the next 6 months is to take that pre-existing document, work with our teachers, ESPs, related service providers, update, revise, and improve that collaborative planning guide. That guide is really for use with classroom teams, again, with teachers, ESPs, and related service providers, all folks who come together to serve our students within our classrooms. And it helps us to identify what their roles and responsibilities are as members of the team to help educate our students. Our goal is to, again, take that guide, improve it, update it, and so that we can be ready to train our staff as we go into later this spring and into next school year. For our family and caregiver goals, that this coming 6 months, our goal is to conduct an audit and produce a summary report of current methods of communication to parents. We'll complete that by the time we get to that June 30th deadline. And that'll segue into the next part of what I'll share, which is next year's goals. So these are 1-year goals from July 1 of next year through June 30th of 2025. And for our students, once we have those assessments that we've identified as being appropriate for each of our students, then we want to set growth targets for each one of our students. And our goal is that 80% of our students will meet or exceed those growth targets that we've set for them. For our staff, we want to see them using that collaborative planning time guide 100% of the time. So when we're walking through a classroom or we're walking through a classroom meeting or a program meeting, that we're seeing evidence of that planning guide being used in each instance in which we're walking through and we're collecting evidence looking for that guide to be implemented in the way that we designed it. And lastly, back to the family and caregiver goals for next year, a comprehensive system for communicating with families and caregivers regarding school and academic progress will be completed. Using that audit that we'll do over the next 6 months, and pulling that into a comprehensive plan of how we're going to communicate consistently to all of our families about the academic progress of their students. Any quick questions about those goals before I pass it on to my colleagues?
I have a quick question. On the family care goals that you just mentioned, the comprehensive system for communicating. Clearly there's a definition that would have to come from what constitutes comprehensive. And then the question is the outcome. What's the goal, the outcome that you're trying to get to? It's or how are we communicating, how effective it is, and how engaged those families and caregivers are in relationship to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal is really all of that. Like, what do our parents need and want in terms of communication? So part of our audit this next 6 months is what's currently in place. Some of which maybe are really obvious, like around how might a parent or a guardian access a student's grade or attendance. But there's lots of other ways that we're currently communicating with our families and caregivers. And so we want to understand that. We want to understand their perspective about what they're looking for. And so that when we put together a comprehensive system of communication, that we're really meeting the needs of what they're looking for. So their voice will be really important as we try to communicate out, not just our IEP goals, but again, academic progress in multiple ways, grades, attendance.
Because I'm just acknowledging that's a lot. Like that will be, you consider all of the different ways people access and engage with communication, not only back to the caregiver, but also where it's coming from. So the staff and what level of the staff and needs in the building and so on and so forth. And as students are moving around doing different things, so on and so forth. So comprehensive is a perfect word for it. I wasn't belittling that. I was more like, I'm just acknowledging, depending on how you look at that, that's a pretty large task. So I'm just acknowledging that.
Yeah, for sure. You're right. And it's one that we acknowledge as a large task, and it's one that we actually share across our departments, just for that very reason, so that you'll hear from my colleagues when I pass the baton here in just a second, them also talking about this goal of this comprehensive system. That it's not just a goal that lives within achieving academic success, part of the strategic plan, but it's really part of what lives across the entire strategic plan. And again, you'll see that in the next couple of slides as well.
Thank you.
Janet? I just had a quick question about student goals. I think that this is a great and lofty goal. When I heard discussion about it, though, I was wondering where student voice and agency and choice comes into play in these goals. Because I heard the word for, that the goals are going to be set for the students. So I'm wondering, is there any discussion around that about are these goals that are being set with the students, or is this something that's teacher driven instead of student led?
Yeah, it's a great question and not one that, that we have all figured out yet. But I think your question and the feedback that's implied within that question about like, how do students become part of setting these goals and targets that we're going to have? Certainly some of it's going to come from the assessments, right? But I also think there's a collaborative process that we can engage, not just the students, but the teachers and ESPs and other folks that are part of that student's team in how we're setting those goals. So yes, I think more work to do on that.
Thanks.
Jackie. As a teacher, that communication system is a huge undertaking. Language and accessibility and all those pieces in there. I guess what's rattling around in my head is you're having students coming from multiple districts that have been using multiple different communication tools. And as a parent, it's hard enough to navigate life, much less the 15th of communication tool that we've had to use. Has there been any kind of discussion around that, or finding out like if most of the districts use this tool, maybe we want to make sure that's one of the tools we have? I don't know.
I do hope that our audit will uncover some of that. I think at one point, maybe I wanted to go even faster than what's here. And I think maybe it was Marcy who said, maybe we should just like really do slow down and do this audit, right? And so I think it's both about what's happening within our district and the experiences our students and families are bringing with them as they come into our district. So as we work through that audit process, uncovering what's happening in our district, but then again, what are those experiences that they're coming in with from all of the member districts? Because you're right, that'll be an important part of how we think about going forward and creating some coherence for a parent or caregiver on the other end.
I would just add, I mean, again, because I picked up on the language part, is that it's adaptive, right? That whatever you come up with, when you say a comprehensive plan, it sounds like you have it fully baked, right? It's never fully baked because there's always going to be change and things that are happening, whatever it is. So not that I need the words changed on there, but more from the tone that you just said, Ben, that like, it's an ongoing adaptive process because things are going to keep moving. And so I wouldn't want you to be thinking in your plan that, oh, I got that. And in 18 months, we're good and we can check that off. No, it's going to be an ongoing sort of process that's going to happen from that standpoint. And then the auditing process that then comes from how well is it working to then go from that standpoint. I'm sure it's baked in here too, but I think I'm just getting a sense that's probably what we're picking up on, given that in our own environments, that's challenging enough. And to what Jackie just said, it just adds a whole nother layer to that. So we're just, I think, cognizant of realistic intangibility to make something happen and knowing that I love the fact that you're reaching for that.
Marcy. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to add to it, when we think about students coming from different districts using different systems, then we also think about who our students are and how they are able to communicate with their families or caregivers regarding how was your day? We know it's this big. But if you're a new family coming in, what we would like to have is to say, first of all, welcome. And here's what you can expect in regards to communication. Now, so yes, you have IEP meetings, but some students' academic goal may look different. And so how are we going to talk about progress? So it also is a guide that's used to sit down with a new family and say, here's what you can expect from us. And then through the IEP process, also saying, what else would you need? And so here's things, and with that teacher lens too, to say, I can't communicate in 10 different, modes. So what does District 287 do? When will you know you'll get communication? You get communication on positive, negative things. So it is talking about with parent voice in that audit, saying what works for you, text, emails, and what do we need to do as a system to be responsive to that? And so that's what we're really looking for. And then some level setting. So when a family comes in, they may have experienced something in your district and it is different. And so we have to say, what do you need and how can we help you through it so that you feel informed along the way?
Kim?
So how does this, or does it even intersect with communication and collaboration back to the member district about that student's progress? Because one of the things in our lunch this week with 2209, we talked about is transitioning students not only to 287, but back to their home districts and the need for perhaps intentional collaboration and communication. So when, 287 is like, this student is ready to return to the home district and this is what they're going to need, that the home district is kind of up to speed on that and ready for that, understands what it means for that student to come back.
We have begun systematically implementing a reintegration framework, and that starts actually at the onboarding or welcoming meeting that happens when a student enrolls, which is to talk very intentionally about what are the goals for reintegration, what does that look like, and that way student, family, member district reps who are pretty connected with the students. Those would be your coordinators, assistant directors, supervisors. They have various titles in your districts, but they attend IEP meetings. We are working also to be able to provide ongoing data as we improve our data process on progress and those things. But really it's at that IEP team level that the planning happens, and the plan for supports, and the plan for how we, gently release and what that's going to look like. I think we really have a nice trajectory going on improving our reintegration. I mean, we're not anywhere near where we want to be, but we've seen really a lot of growth in that area. And I think we all share that concern that that needs to be planful, supportive, and intentional.
Marcy?
Can just to add to that, what we talked about at our meeting was also if our member districts use the FAST, so thinking about the student goal, if your student was assessed in your home district and then transferred to us, we don't need to redo that. And so it's really connecting with no student needs to go through one more assessment. So really thinking about how do we get that information, launch from it, and then launch it back to the member districts. And so that's what we really talked about. Yeah, that's great.
All right, let's move on to our next series.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here to present to you our 6-month goals. So just to frame this up, right, we'll talk about our 1-year goals. Our 6-month goals was an opportunity for us to think about what is it that we need to do foundationally this year so that we can start to realize those big goal statements. So I'll share with you what we would like to see for our students, for our staff, and for our families and caregivers. So for our student goals, is that we'll have 40 students, at least 40 students in our Tier 1 and Tier 2 programs and academies. We'll provide input on the accessibility and course offerings in a digital format. So you'll see that our larger goal, right, was students will have equitable access to educational opportunities and resources. The thought behind this is that our students need to be informed of what those opportunities and resources are. And we need to make sure that they're informed in a way that they understand. So this year, what we want to do is collect some information from our students so we know what they can expect, we know what they need in order for them to understand what we have to offer, and then we can build that format, that structure around what it is that they need and what they would like. For our staff goals, we'll develop a cultural calendar featuring dates and observances, educational resources and recognitions of different cultures, and then provide that to all staff. So one of the things that we heard from staff again is that they really wanted an opportunity to feel seen, to feel heard, and to feel celebrated within our district. And so one of the things that we can do that is by providing intentional opportunities throughout our year for staff to facilitate that for one another. And so we'll be working with staff to determine what are those opportunities for us to build intention. Not that that's the only time it happens, right? But what is that time that we build intention around that, and that that we can develop that and share that resource. And then for families and caregivers, is that in order for families and caregivers to be seen, heard, and feel welcomed in our district, we need to ensure that we are communicating with them in a way that they understand. And so we'll do an audit to determine our current level of cultural appropriateness of our translation and interpretation services, the providers, which languages we need to have, and how we're using them. Right. So again, this is a part of that, the comprehensiveness of our communications audit. So I guess my portion is around language access, and that our families, we're intentional about not only finding the languages, right, but we're finding culturally appropriate and culturally responsive providers, and that our language offerings match our demographics. All right, so now that was the foundation of the work that we'll do this year. These next goals will support those goals will support the work of these next goals. For students, our Tier 1, our Tier 2, and our Academy students will have digital access to view all of District 287 courses and select classes. This means that our students will be able to see that, oh, I can I can take a science class, or I have we have economics to be offered, right? I can fulfill this credit with an economics course or whatever that may look like. Is that our students are able to see that, and now we can talk about building intention, right, to access those things if we communicate those to students. And we'll have a process, right? To select classes, that means that we'll have to develop a process to work with our counselors to talk about how our students are being able to access those classes and what they need to fulfill their credits or IEP goals. For staff is that each of our sites and programs will host culturally relevant educational opportunities, experiences, or performances. So we'll provide a list of opportunities, and then our staff and our sites really get to determine when do we build intention twice, at least, right? Like when do we build intention twice? Not only to provide those windows, mirrors, and sliding doors. And then lastly, for our families and caregivers is that we will provide consistent standards of usage. So this is the how, this is the when, and that will ensure that we'll have providers that can do that for our staff and for our families through interpretation and translating. That's what I have. Any questions, thoughts, reactions?
Jackie. I love this cultural calendar idea. Is that going to be incorporated with all in one calendar, like the days off of the schools plus all these cultural things on one calendar, or is it? I'm just envisioning as a teacher, we have a district calendar.
Yeah.
It's on my wall. Everything that I need to know is on that calendar. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
the format of the calendar we haven't really considered yet. So the work thus far has been, what do we want to have represented on said calendar, right? We've been working with our equity leaders, communications department, and the equity inclusion coordinator have been determining, as we've been going through the year, when do we stop and pause? But could it look like that? Maybe.
Superintendent just wrote it down. On
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like that. Yeah. But we started developing those resources and saying what happens naturally within our within our sites too. We've noticed a lot of energy at the beginning of the year around Hispanic Heritage Month. So we were super intentional in saying, well, we need to make sure that we have resources to support that, right? So we've been using this year as an opportunity to say, like, what happens naturally, where can we build intention, and where and format will be, of course, a part of that conversation. But thank you for the suggestion. Anything else? That's it.
Right. So now we're moving on to promoting social emotional learning, and we already kind of have the format down for the other two. So we're going to focus on these student goals that we're going to look at in this first 6 months. So the first one is that students will participate in the selection of the district social emotional learning curriculum, and then professional development will be completed. So kind of going to what the question was asked earlier of what does that selection process look like? We'll be working with teaching and learning to mirror some of the curriculum, so some of the curriculum things that we do when we're looking at any type of curriculum adoption. What are some of those things that we're looking at? But we will be involving students in focus groups in identifying what we actually use. We want to make sure that it's something that they find that it's relevant and that will be useful and helpful from their point of view, not the adult point of view. With our staff goals, once again, another audit. Current onboarding processes will be completed with recommendations for improvement. So what we plan to do is try to look at staff that have been hired within the last year, but then also staff that have been around for longer that may be mentors as well, to get some feedback on what does that onboarding process look like? What are some of the strengths? What are some of our opportunities for growth, so that we can try to work across departments and work with HR and special education, teaching and learning, equity and inclusion, just working across to say, what are some of those things that we can embed as we think about social emotional learning in that bigger, broader sense. And then with our family and caregiver goals, we will be working to identify dates for family caregiver engagement and gathering feedback on suggested social emotional learning topics. So as you look at what the 1-year goals are, one of the things that we've had as feedback is that obviously our sites have their own programming and supports, but we also heard loud and clear through the strategic planning process that people wanted opportunities to come together. We are not required as a district to have a special education advisory. However, that doesn't mean that we can't create opportunities to bridge the gap between the things that we're doing within our school settings and what we could be providing to our families. So similar to those of you, I think most of you were here. If you missed it, I'm sorry. When you were here to experience the drumming, for example, how do we take some of these social emotional learning activities that are happening in our school and then bridge that with our families at home? So as we look out to our annual goals, with our student goals, we are focusing on 80% of our tier 2 elementary and middle school, as well as our academy students, developing their own SEL goals, self-monitoring progress, and conferring with staff. So that's going to be a little bit different because it's their identified goals. They're going to help us identify the curriculum, and the curriculum that we'll be looking at will have some type of goal feature to it that will make it a little bit easier to do this work. We focused on this specific group. We know we could incorporate many more groups. One of the things that we heard loud and clear is that tier 3 programming often needs adaptation, that in a year, we didn't think we could get everybody. So we said we would start here and build from there. With our staff goals, our goal is to create a universal onboarding system for new staff, including mentoring with experienced staff, and a minimum of 8 hours of understanding disabilities, mental health, trauma, and de-escalation, incorporating a lot of the aspects of social emotional learning within it that would be developed. So we would be listening to getting all of that feedback through the audit and then saying, what do we need to prioritize to make sure that as our staff are going in, when we think about adult social emotional learning too, that our staff being regulated is extremely important so that they're able to then work with those students. And then last but not least is our family caregiver goals. And our goal is to have a minimum of 4 SEL-based opportunities that will be provided. And so we'll be looking at where do we provide those opportunities, when do we provide those opportunities, and how do we make sure that that links to the programming that they're actually receiving within our schools. So that's a big part of what our goals are for next school year by the end of June of 2025. I think that's my last one. Any questions?
Shannon.
I have a question and a comment, which you probably are expecting. I'm so super excited to hear that students will develop their own SEL goal. That is amazing. I'm so excited for that because I know marvelous and surprising things will be developed. And then I am wondering about the universal onboarding system for new staff. That 8 hours of training sounds amazing and lofty. And I am wondering, is that for all staff across the board, including, teaching assistants, paras?
Yes. So we do recognize it is lofty, and we recognize that we've heard through our group. So we heard from caregivers and families, we've heard from students. When we look at the feedback, depending on which lens and way you look at it, some of the comments were, we know that your staff are working with kids. We know how difficult things can be sometimes. And we recognize that some of our staff, because of just turnover and our referrals, they're coming in and there's not as much training. So the focus group that I work with was very adamant of how important this is as people who are mentors who have been in the district a number of years. So we know it's lofty. However, we also are taking advantage of something we did with our Wilder ARPA grant, which is recording videos of different leaders and different individuals providing training. So our hope is that, yes, 8 hours is lofty, but it doesn't mean that the 8 hours is all at once. The 8 hours we're looking at, is that within 30 days of hire? What is realistic for us to do? And then looking at, is it all face-to-face, or can we embed and have a hybrid approach where there's some downtime, or there's this opportunity because of students being absent or whatever's happening, that you could take advantage of doing some of that learning. We're looking at how do we develop that. So that'll be part of what we do in that 6 months, is looking at how, once we get that audit information, what's realistic, how do we make that happen? But we know it's lofty, and we feel like it is essential. It's necessary.
Thank you.
Do you want to add how the mentoring program will connect to the professional development. So it's not a one and done.
No, it's not a one and done. So we already have a mentoring program. I think part of what we heard is that sometimes our mentoring, depending on who your mentor is and depending on which site you're at, there's a little bit of difference in processes, which is why we talked about universal. Is saying, how do we make sure that it doesn't matter which site you end up working at, that we are being consistent with this is the minimum of what you're going to for sure get. We recognize, like care and treatment presented earlier, it's different, but what's our universal? What do we believe is essential no matter what site you work at in this district? And the mentors having that same level of understanding of knowledge of this is what we're offering, so that when they go and have those mentor-mentee meetings separately with those that they mentor, they're embedding and taking from that information and building upon that. So it's not 8 hours and you're done. It's 8 hours. And when I'm meeting with my mentor as a new employee, I'm able to talk about what did I learn about critical incident debriefing? I'm struggling with this incident that happened. What are the resources available? How do I connect those dots? Those are the richer conversations that mentors and mentees can have.
One, that sounds amazing, right? And just really important for across systems. My question is about the SEL-based opportunities. And so I think, so I had some ideas when you said it, but can you say a bit more about what those opportunities might be or what that
Sure.
might look like or sound like?
Yes. So within our programs, for example, we talked about Move Mindfully and learning some of those strategies, or Rhythm to Recovery and learning more about drumming and how some different relaxation types of opportunities to help students learn how to self-regulate. So we teach those skills within our school. But what we found from some of our family and caregivers is how do we take some of what you're doing in the school and bring it home? Learning how to do breathing exercises, learning how, and we may think, oh, well, doesn't everybody know how to do those? No, they don't necessarily. And they don't know a variety of calming strategies. And what may calm you here may not be a good calming or coping strategy over here. So what I do at school may not, if there's no translating to home, I'm losing that. So the goal is to look at what are we doing internally at our tier, not, and we have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, but offering a variety of different offerings that families could give some feedback to. Here's like a list of 10 or 12 different opportunities. What would we want to do? And then as we go through the year, we may find these work really well, these weren't as well received. And when we go around to do the next set of goals, we can take that into consideration.
And then Kim.
I was just going to come back to the universal onboarding part because there's one more thought I had about that. One, in terms of doing the 8 hours process over however long that takes. But I'm also thinking of it from a recruiting standpoint, right? That as you recruit staff in, making sure that there's an understanding of not solely this as a requirement, which can be a negative connotation, but actually this is a supportive element about how we want to, this is what we do at 287 to be able to make that happen. That's number one. Then number two is then the opportunity that when someone comes through all of that, then with the mentor, but also with the supervisory component, how well did they take up that information and are they able to actually apply it to bring about the results? First for the students, certainly, but secondly for themselves and for their team.
Right.
That like, I sort of see that as when you talk about a universal program, it's making sure going just like anything in the plan, is it tangible? That it's not a checkbox. It's actually something that's going to serve the purpose for which I'm sure you heard a lot of feedback on. When we do these things, we oftentimes produce a new staff member who gets it, can handle it, and can thrive in a very challenging environment. Yeah. So these were just all statements. But I'm just saying that like, as I think about how that gets implemented, language is important about intentionality around that. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
So this is just, might be a blinding glimpse of the obvious, but kind of along with what Michael said before about the communications, speaking for myself, as you get through the first 6 months, I mean, yes, this board is going to vote on the strategic plan, but we're at the beginning of a 5-year strategic plan, right? So I would just offer up, as you get through the first 6 months, and then you look at the 12-month goals after that and go, ooh, you know, maybe we need to change it, we need to contract it, or we have an opportunity to expand it. Don't hesitate to come back to this board and say, we've learned some things and we're gonna make some tweaks here or there. Strategic plans, I mean, you've got the high level, but when you get into implementation, it needs to be a living document. And I just think about all the work you guys have done to put together this strategic plan. And then, as a proud member of the ad hoc policy committee, I think about all the work you guys are doing on that. And then I think about, they have day jobs too, right? Want to make progress, but just make sure to set yourself up for success.
Well said.
Yeah.
So what she's saying is support your own SEL.
Yeah. Right.
I did want to add one quick thing
Mhm.
besides, wow. I mean, I just want to say, wow, thank you for all of this. And one of the things I've heard from many support staff is how they feel valued when they are been given professional development, and how we are recognizing their value as professionals by offering professional development and for taking care of their social emotional well-being, because those of us in the trenches know if you ain't regulated, kids ain't regulated. So
true.
ask me about yesterday.
We cannot end this presentation without acknowledging, I can't, and I know all of us just have to thank our students, our families, our caregivers, the staff, member district and community partners who, we had an amazing number of folk participate in and engaged with the development of this plan. And it was a big lift. And it has been really evident that it was very worthwhile. I think you can see that we're on a good path here. I totally agree that there's probably some massaging and iterations as we get into things. But we've got a great place to start here with an awful lot of good information, and so appreciative and really appreciative of Marcy's leadership as she shepherded us through this process. So
I have one more.
yes.
Let's thank you all. Carol?
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Amazing, beautiful. And since you're here and you didn't get to hear me say that graphic is amazing.
I have to give credit to Rachel Rose. That
Yes.
really is a talent and a real asset to the district and our students and staff. So
Pass it on.
really kudos to her. Yes, I will make sure she knows.
Thank you.
The illustrations are great. Just wonderful.
Yeah.
Makes you want to read.
Rousing endorsement. I love that. Are there other higher level comments or questions? Because we are being asked to approve this plan this evening. Michelle.
As we take this grandiose step, I'm very excited. I just, I've been here a long time. Everyone knows that. But during this time, I cannot believe the quality of every plan that we've created. And there have been plans that came and went and came and went and went and came. But that's what's exciting because it's vibrant and you're caring for such wonderful stuff and children. It's above and beyond what one might visualize. I think this is a very courageous step. And so I applaud you all who have been so helpful. It gets emotional. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I also just want to acknowledge, I feel like you've done a wonderful job of bringing us along in the process. We have had many opportunities to see how this has developed and grown. And I think that gives us as the board such confidence and such a clear understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so I think you've just done a beautiful job of helping us get to tonight and knowing, yes, like we are on board with you in this plan. So thank you for that as well. With that, is there a motion to approve the 2024-2029 strategic plan?
I'll move approval.
Okay, we've got a motion by Shannon Andreessen, a second by Renee Bowman. Any final discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye. Thrilled to share that we have unanimously approved the district's new strategic plan. Congratulations,
you.
everybody. And we still have a whole lot to do tonight.
Right.
Nope, it's not time to go yet. Oh, sure, go ahead.
Can
Mindy.
these reports be shared with our district boards?
Yes. Yes, we can
Okay.
give it to you electronically and we'll get
Oh,
you copies.
wonderful. That's good.
We'll share it out to our member superintendent, special education and business teams. So once you give us the green light, we're gonna go.
Fantastic. All right, carry on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item under my report is the 2024-2025 calendar. This is year 2 of our calendar committee. It is representatives from the 284 union, 2209 union, administration, and unaffiliated come together and look at all of your calendars. We actually do an analysis of your calendars, your breaks, when you start school, when you end school, and quarters and all of the above. And guess what? You all don't match. So, so what we do is we really look at what are the majority and larger districts and where do our students come from to support transportation and decide a calendar that is aligned with District 287. And so after the committee comes together and drafts a calendar, then they go back and get feedback from their constituents. And then we come back and finalize it in today and bringing forward the calendar for next school year. We also notice a trend in member districts that they're doing 2-year calendars. So you always have to lead the way so we can analyze your data. So I anticipate coming back in a year with a 2-year calendar in alignment with what you member districts are doing. Questions?
No, but thank you to the committee because I know how hard this is.
And I can't imagine looking at 12 calendars and it's a lot.
I have to tell you, it's a really great committee. And I analyze it so that they have a summary report.
Well, thank you for that.
So, yeah, so their time is valuable and it's a really good, strong committee.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Is there a motion to approve the 2024-2025 school calendar?
I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Sarah Johansson and a second by Michelle Kuntz. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the calendar is approved. We move now to our instructional report, which has several really important items tonight. Ben McGrath gets to spend a bunch of time up at the podium with us. And we will start with the enrollment report.
The color of his sweater shows that he knew he was going to get attention tonight.
Thanks for 287.
That's right.
Yeah.
Orange and the blue, I like it.
Board Chair Brockie, members of the board, Superintendent Dowd, thank you for allowing me to present to you the enrollment report. I'm a little late here in the middle of December on this report, so apologies for that. We'll work to move up into the calendar year as we bring this report back to you in the future. I'm going to walk you through the document that you have in your board packet. Just a few things on the outset to explain what we're going to be looking at. First, it's important to note that we're going to be talking about an ADM, primarily an ADM report, average daily membership. If a student was enrolled all year long and attending classes all day long, that would be a 1.0 ADM. If they're attending 1 or 2 classes, a partial day or a partial year, it would be less than a 1.0 ADM. Another thing to just note is that this is from a particular point in time. This is from October 23rd. And so all the data that we're going to be looking at is all taken on that specific date. Some things have changed since then, as I'll talk about as we go through the report. At times, it's really important to understand what the different tables and graphs are actually saying, because at times it's slightly different groups of students. So you'll see some fairly small italicized font that helps to explain some of the data that you're looking at. So just a note about that. I'll start with the bottom of page 2 and use that as an example of how most of this report is laid out. You'll see in the October 2023 column, that is our ADM on that date on October 23rd. The middle column that says projected for 2023, that's what we projected back last spring for what we thought that we were going to have this school year. And then the column to the right is the differences. So at the bottom, you'll see that does not include Northern Star Online or our care and treatment programs, but those numbers do include Pathways and our itinerant students. Pathways, the career and technical program at Hennepin Technical College. A little bit better information or more specific information is on the page that follows on page 3 at the top of that. That page, you'll see our federal setting 4 special education ADM. You'll see that in October, we had an ADM of 465 ADM. We had projected 492. So we have a difference of about 27 ADM. However, it's important to note that we typically make up quite a bit of ground on ADM over the course of the year. For example, last year, we saw that ADM grow from October until the end of the year by 20. And we're likely to see that same kind of trend happen here. So although that projection, like we're under that projection in October, we're likely to make up that 27 or so ADM over the course of the year. One more note, as we'll see later in the document, that number of 465 ADM is also above last year's ADM. At the same time, I have some historical data as we get deeper into the document. In the middle of that page, our care and treatment programs, perhaps this stands out just a little bit to you, and that is that our ADM is almost 60 less than what was projected. There's a good reason for that. There's 2 programs that closed. Omegon and previously Headway North, now Ewable, are 2 programs that closed after we did projections. And that makes up the large portion of the difference of what you're seeing there from projected to actual in October. It's also true that over the course of the year, as students enter treatment facilities, that it's likely that those ADM will grow as a result of that as well. Also noted in some of that super small font that is underneath that table. You'll see at the bottom the ALC academies. We refer to it both ways, both as ALCs and academies. You'll see that we are up about 17 ADM over projections. That's a trend that we certainly do want to see continue into the future. When I talk about those historical data in just a minute, you'll see that maybe we have some reason to believe that that's going to happen. Pathways, again, that's the career and technical program out at Hennepin Technical College in Eden Prairie at the top of page 4. You can see there that we are about on our projections in October. And Northern Star Online, in the middle of this page, then there's a little bit more information laid out slightly different here. If you're looking at the shaded gray row, that is actual enrollment count. Most students in our Northern Star Online program, they're not taking it full time. They're taking 1 or 2 classes, so that gives you some insight into how many different students are accessing NSO. The 2 rows right above that are ADM for the 2 programs that Northern Star Online runs. That's independent study and their supplemental courses. That trend, that increase that you're seeing here, the numbers up over last year for NSO. You'll again see that later in the trend document, trend graph as well. that they are up dramatically, and they're continuing to grow and likely will as we add a middle school program. On page 5, then, I'm on historical trends. You can see that first graph refers to total ADM enrollment. And that slight upward trend over the last 3 years is something that we see continue through the other graphs. So at the bottom of page 5, in federal setting 4, special education, those last 3 years of trending upward for our ADM, not quite to where we were back in 17-18, but those 3 years are showing a continual trend to increasing ADM. Likewise, as I mentioned, over at the top of page 6, our ALC academies, you see that same trend happening over the last couple of years. And again, something that we hope to continue to see going, maybe not all the way back up to that 366 where we were back in 2017, but increasing the trend that we're seeing, which is probably somewhere between 15 and 25 additional students each year. Northern Star Online, again, you see the trend line there yet again, although just in a more dramatic fashion. Northern Star Online, coming out of COVID, really has increased their enrollments. And again, we anticipate that going up next year, probably throughout this year and into the future as they develop more and more programming for students. Just a little bit of demographic information. At the top of page 7, you'll see that about 40% of our students are Black, about 30% of our students just under are white. As a whole, 70% of our students are students of color. And if you look at our demographic information regarding free and reduced price lunch, there you'll see that we have about 60% of our students receiving free or reduced price lunch, likely an undercount of the total number of students who are eligible. Those are ones that we just have got the forms back for. I know I'm going relatively quickly here. I'll finish my last 2 pages and then I'm happy to take any questions. I'm looking at member district enrollment, and here you should be seeing a table that has all of our member districts down the left-hand side and the 5 different programs that we offer in District 287 across the top. Here again, you'll find the numbers current as of October 23rd. In this case, we're not talking about ADM, we're talking about enrollment headcount, the number of students that are enrolled in each of those different programs by member district. And lastly, the special education setting 4 referrals, also organized by member district. You can see the site placement, the education center at which those students were referred. This certainly is an undercount. This is from October, and we most assuredly have had many more referrals since October. So these numbers have gone up and probably gone up fairly dramatically. That concludes my report as a whole. I think what the report is showing is that we're continuing as a whole to see upward trend with our ADM over the last 3 years, and we anticipate that continuing into next year.
Questions or comments about the enrollment report? Shannon?
I was just wondering, given the comparisons of prior years, are we, okay, I'm wrapping my head around this question. So you're stating that enrollments tend to go up after this count is shared, correct? That historically we've seen that enrollments do go up over the years.
Yes.
So is there any way to compare, like, let's say the enrollment report, the numbers enrolled for October 2022? Like, are we kind of on track there?
I can specifically answer in regards to setting 4 special education. We did actually pull that number because we were really curious about exactly your question, which is what's been happening versus from our projections to our actuals. And we looked at that for last year. And so we know that last year, for example, that we gained 20 ADM in setting 4 special education from where we were in October to where we were at the end of the year. And so that's why I'm sharing that we're fairly confident that we're going to make up those 27 ADM that we're short from our projections as we go over the course of the year.
So prior year, we gained 20. So we're thinking we'll gain 27 this year.
Probably based on the referrals that we have coming in.
Okay.
Just to add to that, Madam Chair, the way that we do projections is that we meet with our director of special education, meets with all of your directors of special education to project possible referrals. And so what we do know historically that's true is we always start low and the referrals start coming in the fall and throughout the school year. And I shared an email with you just regarding North Education Center and the amount of referrals we've had to date. So we're the trend is always that way. And we actually plan for it. So we always start the year smaller, knowing that the referrals will come. And so that's the history of projections here in District 27.
Michael.
I have a-
Oh, I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Did you want to add to
I
that?
just, if I may, we've had 46 referrals, additional referrals since October 23rd, and all but 6 are currently enrolled. So that just as a reference.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna ask a longer term question rather than the immediate where we are at the moment. Trends that we're seeing in enrollment overall in school districts, certainly in the West Metro, are trending sort of over time with the demographics of our population is on a trend to go down, not up. And so I'm just curious as to, as our population that serves the bulk of what 287 draws from, if let's hypothetically say over the next 5-10 years, that's going to slowly go down, but because of the demand of services is not going down, it's going up. I'm just curious as to how you might be factoring that into as you think about your longer term planning, seeing that we talked about a 24 to 29 strategic plan. I'm just curious as to, notwithstanding the trends that you just showed here in this report, I'm sort of wanting to see where is that coming from or what's going to happen with that in the future. Because that's very important in terms of when we think about our staffing, our compensation models, our cost structure, things of that nature. That's what we're looking at certainly in Edina. I'm sure it's just even more complicated for 287 because one would think, oh, it's not all going to be down. It might actually go up, but it might not necessarily stay up because of the underlying decrease from that standpoint. Or perhaps in other school districts, you're not trending that way. You may be trending higher where you're getting more students as opposed to less. I don't know. I was just curious as to, does that even come into the discussion?
So you're absolutely right. In Edina or in another member district, we might be looking at birth rates. We might be having a demographer coming in and giving us information about where we think that our enrollment is going in the future and helping us with some of that really long-term planning. We don't have that here. And so those meetings each spring that Melissa Broading, our Director of Special Education, has with our member districts, really talking through the needs of the students in each of your districts and what that might mean for us. That's why that's a really crucial part of how do we get to these projections.
Okay.
I would also just add that it's also really important for us to use the trend data that we do have to account for some of those, like where do we see this going? And by having the multi-year data in the way that we do and referring back to that, that also gives us a little bit more information about how can we handle and think about some of the changes that might be going on in population numbers in our member districts.
Well, I mean, on that point, it's then, if you're looking at sort of your 5-year trend that you have here, clearly then COVID happened in there and it's always been trying to think about as we look back through that process and now where we are now, do we actually anticipate coming back to pre-pandemic levels? Some look like they're already are starting to get there. Some are not quite there yet. But as you project out maybe over the next year to two, do we still see continued growth in that area? But we might not actually ever get back to the 2019 or 2017 number. You know the answer. I'm just saying that's part of I'm just saying that's part of the analysis that's being done. So to Shannon's question, right, where you're looking at the trend, but the variables related to the trend have changed or are constantly going back to that adaptability question. There's a constant variation that's happening. So trend is directional, but it's not necessarily, anyway, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely. And
sorry.
Just to add to that, even though overall we're seeing a decrease in the state in regards to enrollment, special education has held stable, right? So the percentage of students identified for special education services has not followed the same trend as general enrollment trends. Um, It, it would be great if we saw a decrease, right? Because then, although our services are valuable and lovely, less students need us. That's not what we're seeing right now, especially outside of the pandemic and what kind of supports. And so we do see what's unique, what we would say is different in our trend data post-pandemic is the younger referrals. And more, we used to have, middle school, high school referrals. It's shifted significantly for us. And so that's been an interesting trend change that we're working through.
I think the financial implications of what you just said are also really important when you think about how the state is funding and so on and so forth. That if that continues to go the way you just said, where the enrollment is down, but special services is going up. I guess I don't have a whole lot of faith that our capital will figure out how to move more quickly to address that. So I'm a little bit concerned about that too. Okay, thank you.
Jackie, go ahead.
I have a question and I should know this by now. Does 287 get referrals of families who are currently enrolled in charter schools or private schools? Like, do they go through their home district and get here? Do we know any of that at all?
So for, right now, we are only accepting referrals through member districts.
Okay.
So enrollment would need to be to the member district in order
And
to
then here.
access District 287. How that occurs is, different for each family.
Sure.
Sarah.
But can I just, but to that point, aren't public schools required to provide services to kiddos who may be going to private schools? Yeah, so, I mean, technically, because of geography, the student could potentially be referred by a member district because of where they live, even if they are.
They would have to receive.
Okay.
special ed
Oh, that, okay,
Of the.
yeah,
They'd have to be enrolled in
in
the
the
member
member
district.
district, okay.
Mhm.
Sure. Okay, so I'm gonna add on to that. So just so I'm clear, so if the member district, if they're in a charter school, like let's say they're in a charter school, it's within the footprint of their member district. Then, so then their member district is providing the special education services. Can the member district then refer direct out from the student's enrollment to the charter school, or would the member district need to bring them back in-house first before sending?
It's a great question. For charter schools in the state of Minnesota, they're all their own LEAs. And so they are responsible to provide their own special education services. Now, they could have an agreement, any district could have an agreement to say, I'm gonna purchase of service from another district because I need special education services. And maybe there isn't a large population, so they may do a purchase of service. If they're charter schools within your boundaries, they may connect with your director of special and say, could we have a portion of your speech? Because I don't need a full-time speech clinician. But at the end of the day, the way that Minnesota has organized charter schools, the charter schools are responsible to meet all of the laws regarding special education. So then if they have a need for a federal setting for a student, they would need to enter into conversations with that member district. And the enrollment would have to end in the charter school, enter in the member district in order to be referred to us.
These are really helpful and important clarifications.
So thank you.
Yeah.
That was a good add-on. That was really
Yeah.
helpful. My question is then about staffing for enrollment. And so if we see our enrollment trends and we have a pattern of enrollment going up, do we do more of a staffing with lower ratios at the beginning of the year so that there's an easy slide as opposed to trying to find staff
That's a great question. That's exactly what we do. And that's a history of District 287. And where we are not across the board experiencing wait lists is because that model is supporting open seats if someone needs it.
That's great. Thank you.
Kim. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the North Star online data on page 4. So the total enrollment, the gray bar there is number of unique students that are being served, but because they're only taking 1 or 2 classes, their ADMs are.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else?
We included the enrollment count there just to give some more scope,
Yeah,
to
no,
tell the
no, that's
story a
great
little bit more
context.
than just the
Yeah.
ADM.
I love these reports every year here and in my member district because I just think you get such an important look into the district through numbers. We know it doesn't tell the whole story, but it is a helpful series of information. And because you mentioned the demographer, I'm also going to use this chance to put in a plug. If you're interested in the Minnesota state demographics broadly, not obviously at the level of detail of what we're talking about here around special education, for example, one of the state demographers presented at the last AMSD board meeting. And so you can watch just that part of the meeting and see a whole bunch of information about Minnesota's population, current and projected. So again, I love that stuff. So in case others do wanted to share that. Thank you. You get to stay and I think John gets to join you as we move to the annual World's Best Workforce Report.
And I'm only staying to
Oh.
reintroduce Dr. John Voss for the world's best workforce. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Good to see you all again. There are 2 parts to the world's best workforce. The first on the previous year, FY23, that we submit to MDE, and then the plan for this year for FY24. Our data as required by MDE is impacted by our student mobility rates, having different students in the fall than in the spring, and having no large cohort of students who are the same age and progressing at the same rate in the same grade level. So it may reflect some differences in what is normally seen there. We focus more intently on individual growth and on other goals within our students' individual education plans. And at the same time, we continue to support that individual growth in the context of providing a common academic learning environment at the most appropriate level. So when we look, first of all, at the summary for 2022-23, what's reflected there is a range of district-wide data from students who can access standardized assessment measures, which also limits the number of students that are sometimes included in these. So first of all, with kindergarten readiness, we had a very small number of students, and so we rely on our district referral process to identify their readiness needs. Similarly, for 3rd grade achievement, we had a very small numbers of students in grades 1 and 2, with only 7 students with fall to spring growth information. In the closing achievement gaps area, we had 131 students complete fall spring testing. So again, the results are skewed in favor of those who are able to test in those areas. The results are very close between our BIPOC and white students, which is encouraging. And it is a small sample size at the same time. Then for college and career readiness, we had fewer students taking the ACT, and there's generally less interest in it now as colleges have been changing their admissions criteria. On the other hand, our graduation rates have slowly ticked upwards from the dips that we saw in 2018 and 19. Some of those differences are based on where students complete their final credits. So in many cases, if students return to their home district for their final term or register in another program over the summer, that's a lot of times where the graduation rate and data is applied. So I'll pause there if there are any questions on the FY23 report. That's what we'll be submitting probably before I go home tonight.
Comments or questions?
And then in setting specific goals for the current 2023-24 school year, those are outlined on the last page of that particular report. We continue to focus on literacy. Our plan includes increasing the number of students who are raising their reading screening scores from fall to spring in that area. And then our achievement gap goal is based more on individual growth. Percent of students who reach their reading growth or catch-up goal is the primary thing that we are looking at. Now that we have baseline data from last year, we'll be able to see if we have similar rates of students reaching their catch-up goals. And if that continues to increase with more testing and more students who are testing fall to spring this year. We made significant progress on having more students involved in that this year. And then as we're implementing our new strategic plan, we'll be connecting these goals to the action steps to reach these student outcomes. And this will also inform how we support college and career readiness and graduation rates. I know there's kind of a lot there that's the student outcome data related. But if there are any further questions, I think.
A clarifying question,
To
the
say.
action that we're being asked to approve tonight is the 2024 plan, correct?
Yep,
Okay,
that's right.
Are there any comments or questions?
Once again, thank you for having the goals that make us catch up with the BIPOC difference. I really appreciate that.
I just think every year I'll probably say the same thing, which is this is important and it is inadequate and doesn't fully align and reflect the realities of our district. Or fair. Absolutely fair. But right, like all students ready for kindergarten is such a clear example of that. That's just not reflective of our reality. And yet we have to have we have to have it. And so I think it's always just important to acknowledge that.
Maybe we could change it to all kindergartens ready for students.
Well, if they're aligning to their own successful student learner equation, that's what they would change it to, right? And so it's an example of how they have two documents and two processes that are saying the exact thing, because one area is saying that we talk about ready kindergartens and ready systems, not ready kids.
So with that broader context, is there a motion to approve the world's best workforce plan? Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Jackie Mosqueda Jones and a second by Kim Ross. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the plan is approved. Thank you and congratulations on being able to submit it this evening.
Thank you very much. Let's do tomorrow.
We move next to the Business Services and Labor Relations Report, where we have one item, the unaudited financial report for 2022-23. May Hawkins, Executive Director of Business Services, and Gloria Wilder, our Director of Finance, will be presenting this evening.
Thank you, Chair Bracke and school board members. I'm happy to be here and present the 22-23 unaudited financial report along with May Hawkins. And today we're going to be presenting the unaudited financial report. A complete audited report will be presented by our audit partners on the January board meeting. And a preliminary audited report was presented to the chair and treasurer along with the superintendent before this meeting. The reason we're bringing an unaudited report today and asking for your action on it is we have to have our audit report submitted. Every district has to by, well, this year I think it's actually January 2nd, but usually the end of December. And we don't have a second board meeting in December. So we are presenting and asking you to approve the numbers that we're presenting tonight. Okay, so what we'll be going over tonight, we will be talking about the financial results for 22-23, and that will include the general fund unassigned area, the interfund transfers for the unassigned area, the general fund assigned fund balances, the general fund restricted fund balances, overall, how the general fund did to budget to actual. We will be covering COVID-19 related spending or the federal grants that came out of COVID-19. And then non-major funds and transfers, brief recap, and a brief summary of our audit results. So this, I'm pleased to say, we have a nice big copy in your paper copy. Because when we project these numbers, they never project very well when we're trying to get a lot of numbers on one page. So you might want to refer to that as I go through the report tonight. But just going through the format a little bit on this worksheet, we start out with that second column. That's the beginning fund balances as of July 1, 22. And then the yellow section is the revenues. So the first column is the revised budget. And then we have the next column, which is the actuals as of June 30th, 23. And then the variance between budget and actual. And then we go into the expenditures, which is the blue highlighted columns. We have the same format with the revised budget, then going into the actuals, and then the variance between budget and actual. And then we have, I'm not really sure what color that is, beigeish, is the fund balance column. So we have what was projected with the revised budget, what we actually ended up in, and then the change from the beginning fund balance to the ending. And then we have the green column, which we'll highlight in another slide, but this is proposed transfers, and we'll go over what's in each of those transfers. And then taking those out, then you get your last column, which is the ending adjusted fund balance. Okay, so the general fund is made up of three areas: the unassigned, the assigned, and the restricted area. I'm going to start with the unassigned general fund here. And in our district, we divide the general fund up into four main program areas. We have the administrative and operations area, the ALC and the academic area, the career and technical education area, and the special education area. And you can see underneath each of those areas, we do break out the grants separately. That's just because grants can vary quite a bit from year to year, so we wanted to break that apart a little bit more. So the district admin and operations area, we did come in a little bit lower in both revenues and expenditures. You can see with the fund balance change in the beige column, we did dip into fund balance a little bit, and then we have proposed transfers going back in, which actually makes a positive adjustment to the fund balance. In the ALC and academic education area, you can see that our revenues and expenditures did come in a little bit over projected. budget, and that was mainly due to the growth in the Northern Star Online program. And then in career and technical education, that's our pathway programs at Hennepin Technical College. You can see the revenue was a little bit lower, and the enrollment ended up a little bit less than projected. We did use a little bit of fund balance in the current year, and then you see a negative projected fund balance or negative transfer in the green column. And we'll get into that, but that brought the fund balance down to about half of what the initial starting fund balance is. And then we have the special education area, and you can see that the expenditures came in less than budget. And this was really primarily due to open positions that we weren't able to fill. So now I'm going to go into that green column, the transfers that we're proposing and what that makes up. So the first area, the district-wide admin and operations, you can see the total on that line is the same as the worksheet. The 59,842 is a positive amount coming back into that fund. And we start with the subsequent year budget. So this is a counting requirement. If in your subsequent year budget, so our original budget for 23-24, we projected expense over revenues of that 51,854. So we're just required to assign that, set it aside so that the auditors know that we have the fund balance to cover that. But then you'll see 22-23 subsequent year budget, that's a positive number going back in because that's what we set aside last year, and that goes back in to offset the expense for the year that we just finished. And then we have the non-expendables. The non-expendables is a UFAR's requirement to set aside anything that you may like prepay in advance of the fiscal year. So we have kind of accounting, two things going on there with the non-expendable. You have what we set aside for 23-24 going to a separate fund balance. And that was things that were in the spring of the year that were prepaying, might be a contract or a conference or whatever that you have to pay before the fiscal year starts. And then you see prior year. So that was the same thing, what went into fund balance that was the year prior, that goes back to offset those expenditures. So that's a positive amount coming back in. So those four entries together end up making that total positive adjustment to that area. The ALC academic fund, we had a very small expenditures over revenues projected with the original budget. So that's the negative 1,884. Now you don't see a positive coming back into the fund. That was because in prior years, we were offsetting that subsequent year during the pandemic by the tuition adjustment reserve and special ed. So part of their subsequent year budget from prior year, part of it's going to special ed and part of it is being returned to that tuition adjustment reserve. And then they have the non-expendables as well, the prepaid expense, a little more in 23-24 than prior year. So overall, it just is a small negative adjustment of 8,341. And then we have the career and technical education area. They, in past years, did not have a prior year subsequent year budget. So, but we did with the 23-24. We're checked using some of that fund balance they had. So this actually reserves what we brought to the board for the 23-24. So it's reflected on our financials, but it's actually kind of reserved for next year. So And then we have special ed. You see the positive 62,000 coming back from the subsequent year. Again, that was kind of, it was earmarked last year for the ALC academic fund. And so now we're just returning it to special ed. And then they had a small amount of non-expendables. And they had actually a little more from prior years, so it's a positive for the net on the non-expendables. And then we have a transfer to strategic priorities, and that's a transfer we usually do every year to keep funding our strategic priorities. And that goes to an assigned area that I will go over next is a general fund assigned. So general fund assigned is area that as a district, we've chosen to take those categories that are listed there on the left and assign a fund balance. So we use those funds for a specific purpose and continue to track that fund balance separately from the unassigned area. Just to highlight a few, we have the operational adjustment reserve. That was formerly the COVID-19. We set aside some money going into COVID, knowing the federal grants wouldn't cover all of it. We do have a little bit of fund balance left there, and once that's gone, we probably won't replenish it. But we feel we'll use that if there's any unexpected charges in the operational area. It's like insurance deductibles, that type of thing. Strategic priorities. Again, we highlighted the transfer going in from the unassigned area to the assigned area. And we have used that area to fund strategic priorities in mental health, family engagement, and equity and inclusion. And then we have the tuition adjustment reserve. That is what we've used to offset unexpected changes in tuition. And we did rely on that during the pandemic to draw that to cover some program expenses.
Is there a particular amount that you're like strategically trying to get to? So now that you're putting 340,000 in, so you're gonna get back to 2.1 million at the end of this period. Is there a particular level that you're trying to get? Is it a percentage of a total amount that you're trying to attain by that strategy?
We don't typically put, we haven't for years put money there, but because we kind of don't really have a set funding source for that. But we are returning that 342 because that kind of came from there originally to cover when Northern Star dropped and the ALCs dropped over the COVID pandemic. So we're returning that to that fund.
Yeah, so when we did the 22-23 budget, right, we were taking funds from
Right.
this area
So you're
to cover
replenishing it.
deficits in other areas. Those other areas didn't end up having that deficit and needing those funds. So in this, we're putting those funds back where we're
I see.
going to take them.
But this is not an account that you would expect to grow significantly beyond
No,
this now 2.1 million that you have listed here.
no.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So then just to highlight a couple of those couple changes you saw in the signed area. And we have this, so the signed area where we were taking out of the unassigned area, we assign it to the subsequent year budget. You see a negative 284,579 there. That's because we didn't need as much this year as we did last year for the subsequent year budget. So the net effect is reducing that fund balance. And then we have the strategic priorities that we're setting that 400 aside for. Okay, so now we have the last general fund area, which is the general fund restricted area. And these are areas that are restricted by state statute that we have to track separately, have a separate fund balance, and statute dictates what we can spend those expenditures on. Just to highlight a couple of those, we have the medical assistance revenue and expenditures. The revenue came in higher than anticipated. The expenditures were lower than budgeted, but that was primarily, we had budgeted for the stairway project at NEC and SEC, and the work didn't actually happen till 23-24. So that's why we see the little bit of lower expenditures than budgeted there. Safe Schools fund balance, we planned a little bit of a decrease in fund balance, and that happened as projected. Safe Schools fund balance also decreased as planned. You remember the 22-23 revenue was dramatically different than previous years, so we did use up fund balance, but then the revenue for 23-24 is up quite a bit from the 22-23. It's at, I think, 1.7 million for 23-24. So that's the good news, is that revenue is coming back up. So overall, excuse me, with the general fund summary, revenues with all those three areas together, they came in very close to budget, less than 1%. So it was a 0.03% less than budget. And then the expenditures came in 2.66% than budget. And again, that was primarily due to unfilled positions. So I think that covers my part, and then I'm going to turn it over to me.
Good evening. So a big thank you to Gloria, our Director of Finance, for all her incredible work on this year's audit. An audit takes a lot of additional hours, a lot of additional work. So thank you, Gloria. So we're going to briefly go over our COVID-related grants for 22-23. This part shows you the name of each of the grants, the amount that was spent from that particular grant area in 22-23, and then a description of what were those funds spent on. I'm gonna, because there are 12 grants listed here, I'm not gonna go through all 12 grants. I'm gonna do them in the chunks that you can see there, in the blocks that you can see there. So our first block is our ESSER II funding for the regular school year. We spent a total of $168,182 for computers, hotspots, interpreters, transportation, personal protective equipment, sanitization, and ALC instructional staff. The second block is food services, and we got some additional supply chain assistance funding because of the supply chain issues that were occurring during 22-23. The third block was our restricted for summer only, and you can see this is our biggest block of funding because the biggest block of funding that we got was restricted for summer only. So these funds were all used to pay for summer recovery programs in July of 22 and June of 2023. So the total from these four grants was $716,909 spent in the summer. The fourth block is our ESSER III funding. This is from our 9.5% state allocation, and then our flow through grants from our ALC fiscal host districts. That totaled $236,134 that we spent in 22-23, and the majority of that was spent on ALC instructional staff. Our next block is our IT block and our emergency connectivity funding, which could only be spent on technology. So it was spent on Chromebooks and other instructional technology. And we purchased $52,808 of equipment. The next block was our COVID testing, right, which is there was leftover funds, so they reallocated funds out to districts, and so we got $20,000 of additional funds in 2022-23 to provide COVID tests to families. And let's see. So that leaves us with our meeting families' needs. So we have a homeless children and youth grant, which is actually a 3-year grant. And they spent $4,982 for supplies for homeless youth and children. So all totaled, the district spent $1,220,493 in 22-23. When we add this to the $1,664,000 spent in 21-22, and the 1.2 million spent from March of 2020 to June of 2021, it brings us to a grand total through 6/30/23 of $4.1 million. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is our non-major funds. So that'll be the next category on the, where Gloria took you through the restricted, and if you know, we're back on our big worksheet. And we're on our non-major funds. So the total revenues for all of our non-major funds came in slightly higher than budgeted. Our non-major funds include our food services fund, our debt service fund, scholarship fund, construction and self-insurance funds. And our expenditures came in 4.32% lower than budgeted. A couple of notes in this area, we added back our construction fund back in because we started projects in 22-23 with the issuance of our 2022A facilities maintenance bonds. And so those projects will continue over the next couple of years. So our construction fund will be active for the next couple of years. In our internal services funds, our expenditures were lower than projected, and they were actually $606,591 lower than the previous year. Our food service fund, because of our smaller sites, has the way the revenue works for food service in the state of Minnesota, we need to do a transfer, which the board approved at the November board meeting, was the transfer to the food service fund of $410,706, which was actually $116,195 less than what was budgeted. So on our recap here, our unassigned fund balance is 8.6% of our general fund expenditures. Our board policy is that we will have at least a 6 to 8% fund balance. The general fund unassigned area did experience a total fund balance increase of $150,963, so a modest increase. Our assigned fund balances, they decreased by $231,786. Our restricted fund balances increased by $553,155, mainly due to the increase in medical assistance revenue. Just to note that our debt service fund balance is going to continue to grow. We have a quality school construction bond on our North Education Center that we will pay back in one principal payment of $29 million. Take my page over. $790,000 all in one big payment in 2029. So we're putting funds into an escrow account every year, and then we make one big payment. Okay. The district's self-insurance fund for health, our expenditures, as we talked about, ended the year lower than our budgeted, which resulted in an increase in our reserve. That reserve is going to be used to pay for future claims, and the district was able to set the health insurance increase for the calendar year 2024 at half of the medical trend rate because we have a healthy reserve. So, as Gloria mentioned at the beginning, a full audit report will be presented by Jim Eichten on January 25th. We did have new standards that we needed to put in place. A new standard was put in place for 21-22. That was GASB 87. GASB stands for Governmental Accounting Standards Board. That was about leases, right? And we needed to dig into lease agreements, track lease agreements, record assets and liabilities for leases. In 2022-23, another new governmental accounting standard was put in place, and that was related to software licenses and subscriptions for software. And I'll have to tell you, leases were a picnic by comparison to software. So that did mean we had to look at every single software license agreement, find all the terms and conditions for every software agreement. We did collaborate with IT. We put in place processes and procedures. We did do a lot of analysis and renewals of agreements related to this, because in addition to the GASB standard, right, we also had the data privacy standards that came forward, right, that we have new data standards, data privacy standards that our vendors need to meet as well. So those kind of went hand in hand. And then my last note here is that due to all of the COVID related funding coming out from the federal government, right, more entities are requiring a federal single audit now than ever have historically in the past. Due to that, the state and federal government have extended the deadline for federal single audits till the end of March. And so the single audit will be presented separately to the board this school year. Thank you. So 2023 was another successful school year. And a big thank you. It takes a team to do this. And so thank you to the whole finance department team. We are very fortunate to have an experienced and dedicated team. So that was a lot of information and a lot of numbers. So Gloria and I are now happy to answer any questions that you have.
I'm impressed that you were that close to budget. Yeah.
Gloria's good.
Thank you. Well, I can't, it's, our budget process is very collaborative. I can't take all the credit. So big thanks to many of the leaders sitting around this table. We meet a couple times a month and talk about budget quite a bit, more than probably people want to hear, but.
Daughter of a CPA here. This is impressive. Thank you.
Thank you.
And as was mentioned, Ruthie and I got a preview of the audit with Jim right before this meeting, and you all will get the full thing in January. But again, just sparkling and incredibly impressive work. So look forward to that happy news in a month. Any other comments and questions? With that, we could entertain a motion to approve the 2022-2023 unaudited financial report.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Shannon Andreessen and a second by Ruthie Dallas. Any final discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye. The unaudited financial report is approved. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We move into board business where I have a number of things to share, so I apologize in advance for the amount of minutes that you're about to hear me talk. First up, the officer election process. I'm just going to read the language from our bylaws. The chair shall appoint a nominating committee of 3 persons not less than 30 days before the organizational meeting. Such committee shall nominate members of the board to serve as board officers. So that's what is laid out in our bylaws. 30 days before our January board meeting would be December 25th. So I am charged with appointing the committee of 3 prior to December 25th. As such, and this will all go out in an email, so you don't have to remember everything. I am hoping to hear from 3 board members at least by December 20th to indicate your willingness to serve on the nominating committee. I think especially because the current officers, which is Ruthie, Shannon, and Casey, and myself, have served for 2 years. You might have even been 3 years as treasurer. Is that right?
I think part of a year.
Yeah.
Two.
I think starting by having conversation with the current officers about sort of where we are, and that would be part of the nominating committee's work. The other thing I wanted to share is that we have 7 member districts whose 2-year terms are up. Even though some of the people have actually just been in their seat for a year because of other board transitions. So I wanted everybody to know the districts who will be appointing or reappointing their board representatives in January are Brooklyn Center, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Orono, Richfield, Robbinsdale, and Wayzata. So I think that's just also important to keep in mind because we have so many moving parts in this district come January every year. And then the nominating committee would recommend a slate of officers at the January 25th board meeting. So that is what is in the bylaws. That is the process that I am recommending. Again, you'll get an email and just ask that you signal your willingness to serve prior to the 20th so I can get that committee appointed by the 25th. So just planting that seed so you can be thinking about it in the coming weeks. Any questions about that? Okay. The next item is the AMSD report. I already shared the demographer plug. So I am shamelessly going to plug the Connections newsletter because Richfield Public Schools is the featured story. And it's specifically about the referendum campaign that we ran this fall. And we had highly successful voter support for both of the questions that we went out for. So the piece really is just going a little bit deeper into some of the work that we did and the communication strategies that we used. So if that's at all of interest, please do check it out. Some calendar items. The next board meeting, as I just mentioned, is January 25th. It will begin with the annual organizational meeting and then roll into a general meeting. I think just as, if not more important, is prior to the organizational meeting on the 25th, we will do the celebration of our outgoing board members. So you will get an official invitation, but if you would like to set aside the hour prior to our board meeting on the 25th, we certainly want to celebrate all who are retiring from 287 board service on that evening. A couple other things. It's in the board packet, but tomorrow there is a literacy event at Ann Bremmer Educational Center that we are invited to. So if you happen to be able to make it from 1 to 2:30, wanted to put in a plug for that. The next Get on the Bus will be on Tuesday, February 6th at Hennepin Technical College. So Juanine will get information to us and please make sure you let her know if you're able to attend. The next lunch gathering with our local 2209 partners is Tuesday, February 20th at 1 p.m. here in the District Service Center. There's also a virtual option. So again, look for more information as that gets closer. Lastly, and there's the MSBA magazine at Everybody's Seats. The Leadership Conference is January 11th and 12th. If you would like to attend as an Intermediate District 287 board member, please let Wendy know as soon as possible so that you can get registered to attend as one of our board representatives. Did I miss anything calendar-wise, Juanine? Okay, great, thank you. I'm just gonna consult my notes here for a second. I think we're good on the calendar front. There is a sort of sign, for lack of a better term, going around that, okay, we'll get it back this way. So please make sure that you have signed before you leave tonight. Renee, you can just slide it over. We'll get it. So with that, we will move to once around the table, the time to share information. And I am going to start actually just to specifically appreciate May Hawkins, who is retiring from the district. This is May's last board meeting with us. What an incredible way to go out with another sparkling financial audit and another really successful year. Wishing you all of the best in your retirement and the adventures to come, and just want to express on behalf of the board our deep gratitude for your commitment to our district and all that you have done over the years. So thank you.
Yeah.
with that, are there other things that board members would like to share with one another?
On Friday on the MSBA Leadership Conference, I'll be co-presenting one of the sessions with
About what?
our superintendent and the vice chair. Um, Making sure all voices are heard and valued with coherence and consistency and navigating kind of, we have a district that has a lot of voices with a lot of varying opinions. And so how do you navigate that as kind of a split board?
Very timely. I also am presenting as part of a team at MSBA. I think it's on Thursday of that week, but I honestly am not 100% sure. But ours is speaking from the Richfield district perspective, how we have involved students in our policy process. And so really going into the examples of how we have done that and actually including students in the presentation itself. So they'll do it. Yeah. Michael.
I was thinking about the diversity and restorative practices that I've experienced at 287 this week. You may not have heard, but we had a very eventful school board meeting on Monday night in Edina. We had probably multitudes of 200 plus pro-Palestinian protesters who came, mostly outside of our community, to protest against a student protest that happened at the high school back in October and a couple of disciplinary things that happened from that. The challenge for us is we're very happy to actually hear all points of view and want to engage with that, but it still has to be under the sort of procedures that one does. And that's not always what's interested in the people coming. So I was thinking about how can we be good listeners and engagers of all the different views that are then there? But even when we try to do that, we're then not actually able to do that because they don't want to adhere to a respectable process. So that was very challenging and more to come, I'm sure. I felt very much the state motto of not really taking Edina in a positive light. And so that was challenging. And it's not about what someone's point of view is. I'm very open to that, but it's very difficult to figure out how do you try to engage while at the same time we still have business that we still have to conduct at the end of the year. And we're still dealing with that. So, but I was trying to think about how we could use the things we learned here that could make that happen. But how do you get people to get together to talk when they don't actually want to talk? That's
one of the things that we're talking about in our workshop, because that meeting that you had has been my last 5 months. Not that topic.
I hear you.
But the last 5 months have been like that, and how do we navigate that and make sure that we respect each other. And
yeah. Well, the hard thing is when you have people don't understand what their First Amendment rights actually are and what they grant you in different scenarios. And the challenge is that when something you're saying is offensive and threatening to somebody else, how much ownership do you have of that? Because you want everybody else to be accountable and own if you were to say something that was offensive to them, but to not have any care about other citizens' needs about that, that's very challenging. And how do we learn in that environment? So that's hard for me. I'm not here necessarily to work on all the agreements because that's not my goal, but I want to be able to listen, try to understand and actively acknowledge, I hear you.
not easy.
Not easy. So
Are you trying to come up with some kind of strategy, a model on how to do that? Or
I think what's difficult is that, I mean, we have things at the school to be able to do that. The problem is that if someone doesn't want to, participate in that model that we have, then where do you go from there?
happens?
Yeah, so the strategy around that, I think, is probably welcomed, at least for me personally. I'm only speaking for myself. But we have ongoing things that are still happening that, and not just at a board meeting. This is still actually at sites with our students and so on and so forth. And as we're all aware, our student safety and our student care is really important, no matter what part of the spectrum you're on of this particular topic. I also, in my personality is not, I'm not making light of it, but I do find it somewhat ironic that yes, the small town of Edina, Minnesota has so much to say and do about the Middle East conflict that's easily solvable. That's the part that kind of is hard. And again, what I'm worried about in our community is that, again, the vast majority of people were not Edina residents. The Edina residents are not happy about that. And I'm worried about the flashpoints that can be generated out of that.
Do you have an identity harm protocol? Not to problem solve, but I'm just curious.
If it is, it's not labeled that, it's something else.
I think OSSE is one of the first places that
Okay,
done that.
yeah.
It came out of the Minnesota State High School League and some of the racial things happening there. And so our district collaborated with them to create a racial harm protocol. And we expanded it to all identities. So that might be something
I'll pass that along.
to think about.
Yeah, thank you.
It's pretty cool.
It would be great if you can maybe get it to Juanine or the superintendent, and then we can all have access to that.
Right.
Kim, were you gonna share something?
I do have something to share. So one of our elementaries, Prairie View, Brett Lobbin, who's the associate principal, has been proud of Brett and his achievement and dedication.
Excellent, congrats.
Anything else tonight? Ruthie?
I'm not sure whether all of you are aware of the group that's called Minnesota School Board Directors of Color. And it's been meeting for several years. Each year now, for the past couple of years, there have been awards given out to significant persons. One for Board of Directors, Director of Color, and one for Superintendent, Superintendent of Color, and one from the Marnie Zone Award. It's the Legacy Award. If some of you know, she was with St. Paul School District. So the awards ceremony take place at the recognition luncheon at MSBA coming up, and would like to invite all of you to try to come, especially if you're registered for the conference.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Sounds like there's all sorts of good things happening at MSBA.
I
Shannon?
just wanted to give everyone a quick update. I don't know if any of you attended the delegate assembly. Was it 2 weeks ago? Feels like 2 months ago.
First weekend.
Yes, first weekend of December. And we talked about lots of issues for school boards and voted on legislative priorities for MSBA. So that was informative and interesting, and just wanted to let all of you know that Hopkins Legislative Action Coalition will be having our legislative breakfast January 19th. And yeah, I think we have a great platform for this year and looking forward to continued advocacy for public education.
I'm glad you said that because in my non-humble brag about Richfield in the AMSD newsletter, I forgot to share that I wanted everybody to know that the AMSD annual legislative preview is on February 2nd this year. So if that's something that you're interested in attending in person or virtually, it'll be February 2nd.
They just follow behind us.
Exactly. Of course. Hopkins has got to lead the way. Anything else? Sarah, go ahead.
At MSBA, go to the luncheon too and say congrats to Cheryl Polzine, who's one of our outgoing board members who also has done a lot with our legislative action committee and other things, is named to the All-State School Board. So we'll be excited to celebrate Cheryl and her relentless commitment to public education.
Awesome.
Michelle. Oh, I just wanted to give a shout out for your comments. I went to the I was a delegate at the Delegate Assembly for many years. And it's a really great place to get to know who your peers are, coming from way up north to way down south of our state. And I found it really, they had a great speaker every year. And there was a lot of work to be done, but it all got done and no crises as of yet, as far as I know.
Depends on how you define it.
Did you enjoy the experience?
Yeah, it was nice. I think that's my third or fourth year there. But I got to bring along a new school board member, so that was
Wow,
nice
that's great.
this first time.
Anyway, so thank you.
Okay, so one last reminder, January 25th is our next meeting, and we're gonna start prior to the meeting with some celebration of outgoing board members and to also welcome new board members who will be joining us in the new year. So have a wonderful month-long break before we start to the new year for you and for your families and communities. So thank you. With that, do we have